Everything's on fire. Everything's on fire. Everything's on fire.
Hello, welcome to the Fantasy Inferno. This week we're talking underrated players or undervalued players here, and I'm Rob. You can find me at RotoHeat Rob on Twitter, and joined by Sully and Bryce. So, guys, where can we find you?
Well, you can find me on. Sorry, Bryce. You can find me on Twitter at RotoHeat Sully, in our fantasy Facebook community for both Redraft and Dynasty, Discord, and hosting the Sully's 2 Cents Dynasty, or sorry, it's now the Sully's 2 Cents Fantasy Football Podcast.
All right, and you can reach me also on the Facebook community, both the Redraft and the Dynasty pages, and then on the Discord. It's free to join that Discord, guys. So get the link and join in there if you want to talk some fantasy football, and always feel free to private message me anything as well.
All right, and we want to make sure whether you're following this live stream or the playback on YouTube or listening on your favorite podcast platform, make sure you like and subscribe to RotoHeat and to the Fantasy Inferno. Getting into our news, it's been a Patrick Mahomes signing a mega 10-year contract. What are your thoughts on that, Bryce?
I think it's smart for the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes because that's a huge deal, obviously. That's more money than he's going to be able to spend, and it's loaded with incentives, with a lot of it loaded with a lot of it guaranteed, $477 million of it. So, I mean, you can't be more happy if you're, a Chiefs fan and Patrick Mahomes, because you're getting paid, but you're getting a franchise quarterback sticking with you for at least a decade. So,
yeah,
what about you, Sully?
My dog's a huge Mahomes fan, apparently. Perfect timing. Yeah, it's a great contract for a great quarterback. Locks him up. What about it today? That guaranteed mechanism. I was trying to figure out what that actually meant, and it looks like he's going to have his guarantees kick in 2 years in advance, with his in Los Angeles, but his were a year in advance. So it puts a little pressure on the wise. They're gonna have to be a little bit more diligent managing it. The only thing I would, if I could find a negative in signing the best quarterback in football, is what is this going to do to the rest of the team as far as, they're young now, but there are going to be some contracts coming up, and what does that look like down the road with perhaps some limited caps. But other than that, the deal is you can't ask for more if you're Mahomes, and I think if you're the Chiefs and their fans, you got to be happy with it as well.
Well, and interestingly, so they're kind of tight against the cap space now. It doesn't affect the cap hit next year. And then 2022, the first year is by far the lowest cap hit he has under the new extension at $31 million. So it gives them a little bit more room to work with that first year into the new extension. And then after that, I mean, he kind of hovers right around $40 million, it looks like, on the cap hit for most of the next 5 or 6 years, with the exception of 2027 being the big one, where he's going to count for $60 million against the cap, and that might be the Mahomes and a bunch of high schoolers show in 2027what but we can wait a while for that.
Do you think he makes it to the end of the deal? And what I mean by that is, do you think he restructures it at any time during his 10 years?
It's possible. I think if there's going to be a point where he gets it cut or gets restructured, it's going to be that 2025 time frame where the guarantee kicks in for 2027. Yeah. Because that's a $20 million jump in cap hit, nearly a $19 million jump. My math sucks. $18 million from 2026 to 2027. So it's going to have to happen with restructuring around 2025 if they're going to do it at all, in my opinion.
Fair.
All right, moving on to our next topic. Players Association voting for no preseason games. how does that affect us here in redraft, guys?
I think if anything, this, first of all, the NFL wants 2 games, the PA wants none. They haven't really agreed on anything yet, so who knows what's going to shake out with the preseason. The way I see it is, this doesn't really do your rookies very much favor, and there's not a whole lot of them in a standard 15-round, 12-team rookie draft that I think I'm going to target and want anyway. And the ones that I do want are running backs, and to me, that's the position that, if any, you need the least amount of preparation and to walk into. So, not saying it's easy to just step into the NFL as a lead running back or as a running back at all, but it's going to be much easier for the running backs than it is wide receivers, tight ends, and any other skilled positions out there, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that. The running back position doesn't really need much of you can get all those repetitions in practice with the feel of the game flow and things like that. I think it just hurts make little miracle stories or opportunities for other players that weren't so valued. We see guys that have proved a lot in preseason and it blossomed into a good NFL career. I mean, most recently, Dak Prescott was probably one of the ones who had a phenomenal preseason and ended up carrying into, how he's playing today. But I don't think it really hurts anybody but the young players that are trying to make a name for themselves that might not be guaranteed starters walking into their programs.
Yeah, and if any deep bench guys, the guys who are special teamers, that kind of stuff, I think, the one situation that becomes, to me, pretty interesting is it doesn't really give Justin Herbert a chance to win the job in Los Angeles. And so it looks like going to roll with Tyrod Taylor out there probably if there's no preseason games. That would be my thought, at least to start the year and probably get an extended run. And how does that change player values for you guys out there in Los Angeles?
I ranked Tyrod to play all 16 games this year.
Okay.
That those coaches make those decisions more in practice anyway. Unless it's a super close race, then maybe a preseason game could tilt the difference. But to me, the rank, I don't want, especially since this is a redraft stream, I probably don't want any part of the quarterback situation over there anyway.
Yeah, but I guess where I was going, do you guys feel like it affects Eckler at all, or Williams, Keenan Allen, knowing that Herbert's got the bigger arm than Tyrod? Does it maybe Mike Williams? I mean, does his value go down in this, knowing that he'd be the starter of the whole game, the whole year? I mean, Sully, you said you were ranking Tyrod to be the starter anyways, so there's probably not much impact. But for me, Tyrod Taylor just doesn't seem like a deep ball guy, and that's kind of where Mike Williams has lived with Phil Rivers, at least the first few years of his career. So I'm not sure if he, maybe doesn't fall too much because he probably wasn't that high anyway. But I'm just worried that he's not going to have any late season resurgence either. He's never.
Bryce, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, Mike Williams last year was a wide receiver, I think 39. Yeah, I'm checking right here. 39, it looks like. So, I mean, I think with Phillip Rivers leaving anyway, no matter who's the quarterback, his value takes a little bit of it can't take much of a hit because that's not very good anyway, but it still takes a little bit more of a hit. So I don't think it really changes his value anything to really pay attention much to, unless for some reason you're seeing reports that he's the new quarterback's go-to guy, which I highly doubt.
Yeah, I agree. And, if you remove Mike Williams' miracle 10 touchdown season, I think it was 2 years ago, he's been pretty fantasy irrelevant, to be honest. And I do see him as the guy that Tyrod's going to impact the most. If Herbert can get in there and he does start to click a little bit, I do like Williams as a guy to look at maybe later on in the season. As far as Keenan Allen goes, I think Keenan Allen's about as close to quarterback proof of wide receiver as you can. Plus, where he goes to work is kind of where Tyrod does his best work anyway, and that's short over the middle. Eckler's going to eat as well. He's not going to catch 92 passes like he did a year ago, but 50 to 60 I think is reasonable. The guy I can't figure out is Hunter Henry in that offense. I don't really know where he slides in, but I still have him in the top 10 at my tight end position. But I think the quarterback play there is, you can almost do a whole episode on that team. I don't think that's too much. I do agree that coaches will know what they kind of want to do going in, and practice will make that happen, or enable them to make that decision.
Sounds good. Antonio Brown's been working out with Russ Wilson. If you're drafting today, are you touching Antonio Brown? And obviously, as we watch it closer to the season, if there's a chance that he's going to sign, his value is going to start going up. But what do you guys kind of think there?
I'm not touching him unless I know he's going to sign, unless it's like one of my last few picks. Personally, especially if I want to stash some depth on my team. Antonio Brown's definitely one of the most talented. Is arguably one of the most talented wide receiver in football. Even with a year off, I would feel pretty comfortable with him on my team. But his off the field issues and how today's world is, and how they take so much influence from fans, I think it's far fetched to see Antonio Brown playing in the NFL again after all the allegations and his behavior.
I think he's going to get signed. I think someone will eventually sign him. It's being reported that when he signs, he's probably looking at about an 8-game suspension. So right off the hop, you're looking at a half a season of production from AB, if that in fact is true. Would I draft him at this point? I probably, like Bryce, maybe, in a typical redraft league, especially if it has a kicker and a DST. Those are usually my last 2 picks. So maybe he's the pick before that. There's no denying world-class talent. I watched the Dynasty Heat Seekers, who said he went from 0 to 100 and 100 to 0 in like in a blink of an eye, and that's pretty much what he's done. If he does go to Seattle, that's a whole other story and a pretty interesting thing there as well. If the unhappy Seahawks actually let Russell Wilson loose, look out. Like, you're looking at a legitimate MVP candidate, lead guy there in Lamar Jackson. But Russell Wilson, if he can be afforded the opportunities to do what he does best, I think that really sparks that offense there.
So just looking at a few wide receivers, give me your guys' take, whether you would take AB or this player in this situation, Marvin Jones.
I'll take
Jones.
Jones. I'd take Jones.
I'd take Marvin Jones.
Deontay Johnson.
Johnson.
Kirk. Christian Kirk.
Yep, still Christian Kirk.
Yeah, probably. I think players could show becomes irrelevant soon.
Sterling Shepard.
Bitterling.
It's getting close now. I think I would still take Sterling Shepard.
John Brown.
Yeah, I'd take John Brown.
So would I.
Justin Jefferson.
I would take Antonio Brown.
Yeah. So would I.
So looks like we've got him kind of just off of some ADPs, maybe plugged in there as kind of a middle 11th rounder, really where we'd look to start taking him. That Justin Jefferson sits right now at, that'd be early 11th round. He sits right at 120. So a 12-team league, he'd be the last pick of the 10th round. Just for some thoughts out there.
Yeah, and I'm basing that all on that report that I read that he's going to miss 8 games. If AB's, if I know, like to Bryce's point, if I know that he's signed and so if it's this time last year, of course I'm drafting Antonio Brown. I'm going to regret it, but I'm going to draft him. But without a doubt, he's an elite talent. He's totally in shape. Like, he hasn't missed a beat. So my thoughts are based solely on him playing only half a season.
Sure. All right. Moving on, our last kind of news topic came down the wire late this afternoon that Raheem Mostert and his agent were asking for a trade from San Francisco because they weren't looking to renegotiate. He's not happy, I guess, that he's being paid like a special teams player.
fair.
I don't
Right?
blame.
I mean, he go ahead.
No, sorry, Bryce, you go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I don't blame him. He's it sounds like he's going in as the starter for this upcoming year, and he's getting paid less than the fullback and the third string running back. So I don't see I can definitely see why he finds that finds that as an issue for him. So and it sounds like the 49ers aren't even trying to work with him. From the never know the full story, but if he's not getting starting running back money, I mean, he sounds like he can go get backup money or go into another situation and automatically get an upgrade in his pay. So I can see the 49ers. I think that they're doing it more of a tactic, like, hey, if you're not gonna pay me, I'm gonna leave. So it sounds like they don't have much of a choice to pay him. It didn't seem like any of the other running very productive. So that's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, I don't blame Mostert for asking for the move. I also don't blame the Niners for not wanting to negotiate with him. We've seen it time and time again that it's the most replaceable position in football. They have, they went with a three-headed monster last year. Kyle Shanahan wants to give three guys 100 carries instead of one guy 300 carries. He's going to continue to do that. There's probably, four guys in San Francisco that are going to get carries out of that backfield this year. I think perhaps Mostert was hoping that it was just going to be him and Coleman this year run if he can actually stay on the field. Jeffrey Wilson's going to be on the field at times to carry the ball, and Juszczyk's going to get some stuff out of the backfield via the pass. So I don't blame either side here. Mostert wants out, raises a big. Where's he going to go? The other side is I don't know why the Niners would negotiate with him anyway. They have absolutely no reason to.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, a 28-year-old journeyman running back who just found a really good scheme. I mean, what's to say somebody else can't do that just as easily? Personally, I was never that high on Mostert, and I think if he goes somewhere else, his value's just so. Moving on here into our actual topics, talking our underrated players. We want to remind you if you have any questions to post them. And we will get to them after our main subject here. But let's go kind of around the table, so to speak. And let's start with Sully. Who's your first guy on our underrated players?
It's Anthony Miller, wide receiver, the Chicago Bears. His ADP currently is 137th in PPR. It's criminally low. Kid's got a ton of work ethic. He's got a lot of talent. Played his first season with basically one arm and scored 7 touchdowns. I think he was I think he was finished around wide receiver 60 that year. And then last year he was pretty inconsistent, especially early on in the season. But as soon as Taylor Gabriel went out with a concussion, Miller took off. And he finished I think it was weeks 12 to 16 or 12 to 17. He was a top 24 wide receiver. And he had horrible quarterback play. So Trubisky missed him time and time again. Ask our founder and chief Bears fan, Rick Butts, about how many times Trubisky missed Anthony Miller when he was open. I just think the kid's super talented and he's got opportunity now. Nick Foles isn't a great quarterback, but he's an upgrade. So I think he's criminally undervalued. I think that's like an 11th round ADP, taking him way before that.
Bryce, do you disagree at all?
No, I think everything Sully just said is spot on. I like Jordan Howard. It seems like that he does well when he gets his carries and he's in a situation where the team's in a rebuild, but he's still fairly young. So I think he's going to see his carries and he's going to do pretty well, especially where his value is at.
And I mean, I agree too with Anthony Miller being undervalued here. Bryce, let's move on to your first guy.
Oh, sorry, I meant Anthony Miller. I was reading yours. Sorry, I've been working so much this week, and my list is wrong on your guys' end. Luckily I did this anyway. I thought we were talking about overrated players this week. So underrated players, I already had it. So I'm gonna be changing it up on your end. But my first one's definitely going to be Leonard Fournette. So Leonard Fournette is ranked roughly for this upcoming season Running back, what is it here? Running back 16 at number 28 ADP. That's extremely low, especially for his production this past year. He was, I believe, a top 7. I think he was number 7 in running backs, or sorry, number 8 for running backs in PPR formats. He saw a lot more carries a lot more receptions this past year, and it was known that he was working on in the offseason. And for him to take an 8-player drop for this upcoming season seems extremely low in his value, because there's I would much rather have in redraft, guys above him that I would not want above him in redraft, like CEH from Kansas City. I think Todd Gurley was ranked above him as well. So Leonard Fournette is a guy that you can probably get later in your draft than his value is going to be.
Yeah, I agree with you there, especially with all the noise coming out of Jacksonville this offseason about how they don't want Leonard Fournette long term. I mean, I think we've seen it before. They're going to run him into the ground, I think, this year, more so than they have in the past, possibly. And that means his 1-year value, well, it's not great if you're a dynasty player for his value, because you don't know where he'll go. For his 1-year value, I think that's a good boost this year.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. I don't know if dynasty output, I don't think that value is pretty accurate, but for redraft, I think 16 is a little bit too low.
All right.
Yeah,
sorry.
Just chime in on LF 27 there for a sec. I agree with what you guys are saying. I only have a couple of concerns, and one is very minimal, and it's Chris Thompson being signed. So number one, he gets hurt every year, so that's going to happen again. But Fournette, I don't see getting targeted 100 times again like he was last year, and I think he caught 72 of them. So I don't see that happening. Laviska Shenault is an interesting piece to that offense as well, because they can line him up pretty much anywhere, including in the backfield. But I do agree. He's going to get the DeMarco Murray treatment. They're going to run him into the dirt until he can't get up again. With Fournette, that might be week 3 or it might be week 16. I don't know. But the value that he's at right now, I'd be all over him there as well, for sure.
Yeah. Chris Thompson, like you said, I think his worry is, he only will play as many games as the letters in his first name. So after week 5, we should be okay. But Laviska Shenault, I hadn't thought about him. That's a good point, with him possibly coming out of the backfield. That could definitely eat into those catches. I agree with you there.
He's not the healthiest of cats either, though. So who knows what's going to go down in Jacksonville?
Right. So my first guy has actually moved up a bit since I originally put my list together, and Jordan Howard, who's gone from an ADP of 104 and roughly running back 42, has bumped up to an ADP of 91, and he's running back 36. I still think that that's a value and an underrated position for him. I mean, we're talking there that he's going in the middle of the 8th round as a starting running back, and I don't think Matt Breida is that much of a threat to Jordan Howard. So I feel like we could probably bump him up another few spots. I mean, I'd be bumping him up for sure past Sony Michel at running back 34. I'd be probably bumping him up ahead of Cam Akers right now because of how bad that offensive line was in Los Angeles, and that Akers is not going to get – we don't know what the preseason's going to be. DeAndre Swift at running back 27, that maybe is a good spot for him to kind of sit. The one thing with Jordan Howard is he hasn't caught a lot of passes, so PPR leagues, you have to be ready for that, but I think he's going to get the goal line carries and the touchdown opportunities for Miami, and hopefully that's enough to make up for not catching those passes.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think where I look at Jordan Howard is, first of all, Rob, it must have your list must have got leaked because the power you have, you raised him like a full round, so that's pretty impressive. He's a starting running back on an NFL team, and he's going to be there. He's valued there. People, I think, tend to forget how productive he has been when he has been on the field. His 16-game average, I think, works out to about 1,295 yards on the ground. So if he can stay healthy and get the carries, he's going to be absolutely a productive running back. Matt Breida, to me, is there for in case of emergency break glass and to catch some balls out of the backfield when needed to do so. So I think Howard is pretty undervalued. I'm not sure I'm taking him over Sony Michel because I think the Patriots will run the ball more than probably any team in the league other than maybe San Francisco or Baltimore. And it comes down to health for Sony as well. I think he can stay on the field. I'm kind of warm into Cam Akers, but I think I would take the safe play, especially in a redraft league with an uncertain preseason. I would take Howard there, but I think he is undervalued, and I agree with most of what you're saying, Rob, other than the Sony Michel piece.
Yeah,
Bryce?
I'll go ahead and talk about Jordan Howard again. But yeah, he is undervalued. It's I mean, running back 30. I don't know the list I might be looking at might be a little different, but he's running back 38 on my list. I'm using Fantasy Pros. But all those guys you were talking about or above him would take over. Some I like Sony as well. Cam Akers is kind of it's a toss up, but there's backup running backs above him like Keyshawn Vaughn. There's other rookies I don't think will start the full year. J.K. Dobbins, guys like that are too risky for redraft leagues, in my opinion. When you have a guy that it seems like he's going to go in there and be a clear cut starter, he's getting paid, and the Dolphins only gave up a fifth for Matt Breida, so it's not like they're going to use him if that's all it costs to give him. So
Totally.
Mm-hmm. My one counter to you guys on Sony Michel and why I would take him ahead is I feel like with Cam Newton there, they're going to run a lot more of James White for those little dump off passes so that he doesn't run when he gets pressure. One, and two, Sony Michel was so bad running the football last year. Granted, behind a bad line, they weren't blocking that great. But James White seemed to find more holes than Sony Michel that I feel like we're going to see not only James White getting opportunities to carry the ball, Rex Burkhead, but then also I think we're going to see Damian Harris working his way onto the field as well. And I just don't know after what we saw last year if Sony's going to bring back even that low-end running back 3 value with all 3 of those guys potentially taking snaps.
Bryce, you're the Patriots guy.
Yeah, I disagree. I think that New England was super predictable last year in the run game. And I feel like they have been the past few years, and that's why Sony did so bad. Because it seemed like when he was on the field, the defense was just like, well, look, their running down back is on the field. And when James White was on the field, it was more of a guessing game at that point. That's why I think that maybe James White had a little bit better when he did run the ball. Sony, I mean, first 2 years is I think the first year he might have clipped 1,000. That might be including the playoffs though. And then the second year he got real close but he played pretty much the full year. So I like Sony Michel, but I could see where you're coming from. Sounds like he might be on your overrated list next week.
All right. We don't want to give anything away. Moving on, Sully, your second guy.
It's the hill I die on in 2020. It's Phillip Rivers, Indianapolis Colts quarterback. Look, it's not the sexiest of take, and it's not a guy I'm going to be probably even drafting, but with the guy sitting at an ADP of like 169, he's the 22nd quarterback off the board. He's not returning, but he's joining an offensive coordinator and a head coach that know him well. He's got weapons in that offense. I think he's just set up for success, and I think he could be that sleeper late round quarterback that delivers this year that nobody expects to.
Sully, I got to ask, since you have Tyrod starting all 16 games, who do you have ranked higher right now?
Phillip Rivers.
Okay. Which is fine. I was just curious.
Yeah.
The thing with Phillip Rivers is I'm looking at the list of guys ahead of him, and I feel like almost with every single one of them, I would want more, with the exception of probably Jimmy Garoppolo. He's coming in at quarterback 20 right now. Rivers at quarterback 22. Maybe Joe Burrow as well if it's a 1 QB league. Just because he's a rookie and there's going to be some growing pain behind him, I like with upside more as well. And so I kind of disagree and think maybe he, grand scheme of things, if it were my list, I'd be bumping him down to, Cam Newton. Granted, he just signed to go. But he's coming in at quarterback 189. Teddy Bridgewater's pick 189. Bridgewater's coming in at pick 182. Gardner Minshew at 191. So just to give an idea there, for sure, Bridgewater and Newton, I feel like I like their opportunities a little bit. Just given, Cam and that Patriots offense and Bridgewater, they're going to be behind because their defense is bad.
So just on the Cam piece, and people say this, and I say this with the most respect, but people talk about the Patriots offense. What the hell are we excited about the Patriots offense for? Cam Newton in his career, his career high in pass attempts is 517. That was his rookie year. He's gone over 500 pass attempts once since then. What is he going to do? Is he going to is he going to break Lamar Jackson's record and rush for 1,300 yards this year? I don't see what the hype is at all.
I just feel like there's going to be a way to get good production. If he's going to be the starter, Bill Belichick is find a way to get good production out of him. Whether that works or not. And maybe I'm wrong to think Phil Rivers should be behind Cam Newton. I definitely don't think Cam Newton's overly underrated by any means. I think he belongs in the 20s. I'm just saying I kind of view him in that park, and they're separated by 5 picks right now at the quarterback position.
That's fair.
And that's almost 3.5 rounds between them in their actual draft position from 148 back to 189. So that's kind of where.
What do you think, Bryce?
I agree with Sully completely on this. I think it's highly underrated in this offense. He now has the best offensive line in the NFL. More known for the run blocking, but they're good pass blockers as well. They're players I would rather, especially in redraft, rather have Phillip Rivers over. For example, Joe Burrow, Ryan Tannehill, Jimmy Garoppolo, Baker Mayfield, Daniel Jones, maybe even Ben Roethlisberger. Those are just a handful of guys. But I also agree with you, Rob. There's some guys that I might also want to touch on that are under him. Cam Newton is probably definitely not one of them, but like Teddy Bridgewater is arguably somebody that I would like only because of the talent around him. But you got to think like Phillip Rivers through his career has always been a points quarterback. He might not lead his team to great seasons or a great play, obviously, but he always seems to put up a lot of yards and a lot of touchdowns. He throws in some picks in there, obviously. He's very notorious for that. But when you put him in this offense with a solid receiving core, a good line, and a plethora of running backs that can do it all, I think that he's set up for success down there or up here in Indianapolis.
Fair. All right, moving on, unless anyone's got any follow-up to that.
Sure.
Bryce, your second guy.
Yeah, this next one, it's probably going to be a pretty obvious guy who's underrated, and that's Odell Beckham Jr. He is ranked right now at receiver. Hold on here. At wide receiver 17 on this list that I'm looking at. I don't know if the list I have is a little bit more updated than yours, Rob, because I just pulled it up today because it was a couple days ago. But Odell Beckham Jr. is ranked wide receiver 17 and 52 overall in ADP. And I think that's it. And I don't really have – there's not much stats to really back this up, guys, because, I mean, last year he had a down year. He was probably arguably the biggest fantasy disappointment of all players. He was going crazy high, top three picks a lot of times, definitely top 3 wide receiver. And now he's below guys like DK Metcalf, Calvin Ridley, Juju Smith-Schuster, who also just had a horrible year, but is still above him, probably mostly because of quarterback situation there. Even second-year guys like A.J. Brown are above him as well. And I think that just by watching talent alone, Odell Beckham Jr. deserves to be higher than wide receiver 17. I have to hope that the Browns somehow are able to put it together with this new coaching staff. I know this guy likes to run the ball, but that might open up the pass game a little more for Baker Mayfield, and Odell Beckham Jr. is just too good of a talent to not give targets to.
I agree. I'm a big Odell Beckham Jr. fan. I do have a lot of concerns. at the same time. Stefanski does like to run the football. I do not think that the Cleveland Browns are going to run the ball as much as the Vikings did a year ago. And I think the biggest reason is because I don't think the Cleveland Browns are as good a football team as the Vikings were a year ago. So there's going to be times where they're trailing more so than Minnesota was, and they're going to need to pick up the pace and throw the football. Where I'm a little concerned about Odell is in the red zone. He wasn't a heavily targeted guy last year down in that area. And I think it's the one area where Austin Hooper actually concerns me as far as cannibalizing some targets in that offense. The other side of the fence is we don't know how healthy Jarvis Landry is, and if he's potentially starts the year on the pup, or does he start slow, or does he miss any time at all? So there's a lot of red flags in there. I do think that Odell's going to get some targets, and I think the biggest reason that I remain a fan of his, he had 1,025 receiving yards last year, and he played the whole season with a sports hernia. I wouldn't be able to get out of bed, and he played the full season and went over 1,000 yards. That's incredible. What do you think, Rob?
Yeah, so my thing with Odell is I feel like he's about right. Like where you're getting him, he's got that opportunity to, be a wide receiver one and be a good value, but we haven't seen it. It's been 3 years since we've seen Odell Beckham, be Odell Beckham. 2016, he had 1,300 yards and 10 touchdowns. Since then, he had only played in 4 games with injury. And then he played 12 games in 2018, had just over 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns. And then just over 1,000 yards in 16 games last year and 4 touchdowns. As you mentioned, he was injured. I just feel like it's a good value spot to get him if he falls to you there, because he has that kind of that league winner upside to give you a couple of wide receiver ones if you've already grabbed one of the or two of the top 12. But you're also playing it smart by taking his recent history of the past 3 years into account. I also, Bryce, you mentioned the running game, and I do think that's going to benefit the passing game for the Browns. Specifically, Baker Mayfield has been very strong off the play action pass in his career, and if they're doing a lot of running, heavy running, I think it's going to, not having Freddie Kitchens calling his junior high offense is going to lead to more play action, actually using the run to set up the pass instead of just doing things all willy-nilly. So I think that will be a benefit, and I definitely expect him to have a better year. But I feel like mid-wide receiver 2 is where we want to go with him.
I think that play action call out is a really good point, Rob, and you saw that with Cousins in Minnesota in that similar style of offense as well. So you're right. Baker has been the most successful off of play action. I think it's a great point.
All right. Moving on to my second guy. I have the Panthers wide receiver Curtis Samuel. And part of the reason I have this, and it's just I don't understand it, given who the quarterback is, Teddy Bridgewater, who's never been a deep ball guy. But Robbie Anderson is going at pick 146. Curtis Samuel is going 31 picks later at 177. I don't understand it. Samuel's a good route runner. He's going to run those short intermediate routes. Him and DJ, I think, are going to feast. Kind of doing what Michael Thomas did, where last year, when Bridgewater played, he was peppering them. Ian Thomas is an up and coming tight end, but I don't think he's going to necessarily affect those. Samuel having a shot. I don't get where the hate is for Curtis Samuel right now. Teddy Bridgewater's probably the best quarterback he's played with in his career, because he's only really played with unhealthy Cam Newton and then Kyle Allen and whatever else they rolled out there last year, which wasn't pretty.
Yeah, I think Cam's last good season, Samuel got hurt like halfway through the year as well in his rookie year. So I don't really like Curtis Samuel, and I don't really like Robbie Anderson in this offense. I think it's a DJ Moore offense, and it's a Christian McCaffrey offense, and Teddy's going to manage the game, and they're going to do what they can to move the ball and score some points. Their defense stinks, so they football. Now, if I'm comparing Curtis Samuel's ADP to Robbie Anderson's ADP, I totally agree with you. It's bonkers. There's a little bit of run game element in Curtis Samuel as well, some jet sweeps and things like that once in a while. So comparative of the two, I think Samuel is absolutely the better value. I don't really want either one of them, but you're right. There's no way that he should be, what is that? It's like 4 rounds higher than Samuel. That's net.
Almost 3.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. You said your math is bad. Mine's bad.
Yeah, I don't like Curtis Samuel either, to be honest. But I think that the value difference is kind of extreme. But I think that the Panthers went and got Robbie Anderson for a reason. I think if they believed that Curtis Samuel is a clear-cut number 2 guy, they would have maybe not addressed a wide receiver too. I know Curtis Samuel is more of a slot receiver, going to run through the middle, while Robbie Anderson's more of a deep ball guy. But a lot of times they might not be running 3 wide receiver sets, which gives Robbie Anderson maybe more opportunities to get more targets and things like that. So if you're comparing their values, yes, it is the values are off. They just doesn't make sense of the hate from Curtis Samuel. But I think Curtis Samuel's overall, like where he's at, he becomes almost like irrelevant when it comes to redraft, in my opinion. But I don't think Robbie Anderson's relevant as well, to be fair. That offense is only target hogs are going to be their running back, Christian McCaffrey, obviously, and DJ Moore, and then Ian Thomas is kind of a question mark. So I would steer clear of both of them in redraft.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess, for me, I'm not expecting to plug in Curtis Samuel to be an every round starter, but he's going wide receiver 62. That's a wide receiver 6. I mean, bench guy.
That's a good wide receiver 6.
I mean, I see him more as a wide receiver 4, maybe a 5. That's just me, especially when I consider all the rookies again in front of him again that won't have camps. Guys like Robbie Anderson up there, Alshon Jeffrey, who is going to miss probably the first 8 weeks of the season, is going 5 full rounds ahead of him on ADP.
That's ridiculous.
I mean, it's just crazy to me. And and the guy right behind him, honestly, I could have picked either one. Both of them are wrongly valued in ADP to me. The guy right behind him in ADP is Deshaun Jackson, and I don't get that one either. But those 2 guys, I mean, they just don't belong that low when you have guys who are going to miss half the season and a dozen rookies ahead of them.
Yeah, the rookies are inflated. They always are at this time of the season.
Right.
So, you'll see that level off probably a little bit, more, not so much in ADP, but in rankings once we get going into the season. I would take Djax over Curtis Samuel 8 days a week. Other than I'm not sure he's going to have a team to play for. They had a little bit of challenges this week, but they're both really undervalued. And to your point about Robbie Anderson, Bryce, it's a good one because what Carolina did this year is they surrounded themselves with players that they know. Anderson has a relationship with Matt Rule. Bridgewater does with Joe Brady. So it's interesting. I think you are on something that they did bring him in for a reason. I don't know. I agree. I don't think he's a guy I want necessarily, and maybe I plug and play him here and there, but Samuel's undervalued, no doubt.
For sure. All right. Bryce, let's move on to your third guy.
My third guy, this one, so I value wide receivers, or the way I draft wide receivers is I usually like to look for a team and who I think is going to get a lot of targets, and who I definitely think has established himself in the past. And this next guy has definitely done that. Brandon Cooks is coming into the season ranked at wide receiver number on this list 35, and it looks like he's going in the middle of the 6th round in 12-man redraft leagues. Brandon Cooks, people forget, he's only had, other than his rookie season, one other season without 1,000 yards receiving, and that was just this past year. He saw way less targets. He only missed 2 games, 2 to 3 games for injury, But the year before that, he played. I think he only missed 2 games for injury last year, and only got 583 yards with 72 targets and 42 receptions. He almost saw double the amount of receptions the year before. He's going, and that was a crowded crowded talent in the wide receiver department over there with the Rams. This year, he's coming into the opposite of that, a very I don't know how you would describe it. They're talented, but they're never healthy. It seems like Will Fuller is a good wide receiver. Every time he's on the field, he seems like he puts up ridiculous numbers, makes ridiculous plays. He's a fun guy to watch, but he only plays maybe a couple times a year. And then you got guys like Kiki Kuti, Randall Cobb. Randall Cobb's a good veteran presence there for Deshaun Watson, and he just lost his number one wide receiver. So he's going to look for someone else, and it seems like the only consistent guy that's going to be there week in and week out. I wouldn't be surprised to see him eclipse 1,000 yards again and definitely get more touchdowns than he did this past year. I could definitely see him being a low wide receiver 1 value to a high end wide receiver 2 at minimum.
Cool. I think if I remember correctly, he missed 2 games, but he also left 2 games really early too. So he almost missed 4. He almost missed 4 games in total. I agree with you. He's the number 1 wide receiver there by a mile. The challenge here with Cooks is he's got a bit of a health risk to him as well. If he takes another hit to the head, that might be it for him. But he produced in New Orleans, he produced in New England, he produced in Los Angeles. I don't know why he's not going to produce in Houston. He's still got a really talented quarterback throwing him the football. Randall Cobb will do a little bit of stuff. Will Fuller, I agree. He's going to, probably get hurt at some point. Kenny Stills is an afterthought, and so is Kiki Kuti. So I don't know if I got him back end of round 1. I would see him settling in sort of a mid wide receiver 2, but there's nothing wrong with having a bunch of mid wide receiver 2s on your team either.
Right.
No, I agree. I think there's some upside there, but you guys mentioned, you're taking that injury risk and gonna have to live with that. And unfortunately, the guy that I like the most is more on that team is more of a dynasty player, and I don't know. It's going to take him a while to develop, but I think it's possible by the end of the season that some fab money could be going towards Isaiah Coulter. So, but obviously early on, you got to be drafting the guys who are going to be starting, and Brandon Cooks, like you said, he's produces when he's healthy. Sully, your underrated player number 3.
It's New York Jets tight end Chris Herndon, who we can easily have perhaps forgotten about. Tight end 16 in 2018. Was pretty excited and jazzed to get my hands on him to start the 2019 season. He started the year with a 4-game suspension. And then he got hurt, and I think he played in 1 game and he had 1 catch and like 7 yards last year. So the middle of the field in the Adam Gase offense is somewhere to target. If you look at, what Jarvis Landry did down in Miami, Ryan Griffin last year, the 31-year-old tight end there. I think, again, he's not a top 12 guy. I think I have him ranked about 16 or something in my rankings, but his value is really low. I think he's coming off board about the 18th or 19th tight end. And, a lot of people, when they draft and redraft, if you don't get one of those guys that you want at the top, if you're not willing to pay the Kelsey, Kittle, Andrews, Ertz type prices, he's a guy that you can wait till almost the end of your draft to pick up. He might even be on waivers in the first week of the season, but I just think that they like him. There's talent there, and he's a guy that, to me, has immense amount of upside.
I concur. I think he's got the upside, but I think no matter what, I view him as a streaming kind of guy. Probably not the tight end I'm going to draft. As I come out of a redraft, I'm only going to have 1 tight end, and I'm going to stream from there. And so I think I don't know that he's that guy just yet. I think I'd rather grab Higbee to start the year, or Goddard maybe. Some of those guys Gesicki going right around that 12-14 range. I'll probably be the last guy to take a tight end in most of my leagues.
So, Rob, those guys you just listed, what is their ADPs in comparison to Herndon's?
Oh, they are much, much higher.
Oh, okay. Because I was not liking Herndon's value all of a sudden if that was the case.
No. They're much, much higher. I was just saying the guys where I'm probably first looking at drafting a tight end, and if teams are grabbing multiple, it's probably even further down the list for me. But Herndon, like you said, at tight end, what is it, 24 right now? Chances are he's probably on the waiver wire. And so if you really like him and feel he's underrated and you're that last guy to grab a tight end, you can definitely jump on him there and hopefully bounces back. He had a good rookie year. I mean, almost what you would call on the level of like a Noah Fant last year, 500 and some yards, what was it, 4 touchdowns, I believe. And, hopefully he can bounce back and have a good third year, but really a second year on the field.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I agree. So you pointed out perfectly, like unless you get one of those top 2, top 3 tight ends, it seems like that field has always only got a couple guys that are really worth taking early. At that point, it's just like, it's kind of gambling, hoping that somebody takes a step into being a solid tight end for their team. And Herndon is on my list of one of those guys that I'd be willing to draft late, even possibly have as a starter. I'm big on Blake Jarwin this year. Guys like that are guys I always target. Late in the fantasy draft, especially redraft, I'm always going heavy running back and wide receiver early. I fill those spots. I go QB, and then that's when I usually grab my tight end. And usually, you're kind of nitpicking. You're picking up the scraps at that point. But last year I got lucky, and Darren Waller was my guy that I was always targeting in leagues. And I think Chris Herndon could take a step in that similar direction.
All right. Moving on, my third guy, and I'm making a last-minute switch, so thankfully Rick didn't have us set up to have them all showing up on screen the way he did last night on the Heat Seekers. But here on my underrated third player is going to be Tyler Boyd, and I made this switch because when you were talking about Cooks, I look and right below him is Tyler Boyd, and Tyler Boyd has been a mid-wide receiver too. Each of the last 2 years, we've got a quarterback in Joe Burrow who everybody's in love with and thinks is going to do these great things, even as a rookie this year. And we're going to take probably his most consistent weapon and rank him as a wide receiver 3. I mean, he's been better with A.J. Green on the field, and A.J. Green will be back. T. Higgins is an eventual replacement for A.J. Green. They're not playing the same position. I don't get where the hate for Tyler Boyd is and why he's a wide receiver 3. He's at worst should be going in the low end wide receiver 2 range. To me, at least 10 spots higher at the wide receiver position than he is.
Bryce?
Yeah, I agree completely. Tyler Boyd's definitely a guy that I like. When you have a rookie quarterback coming in, people are going to get disappointed, I believe, because rarely do you see great rookie quarterback campaigns. But Tyler Boyd's a consistent player. And you did point out, and I was going to say it until you did, once you brought his name up, that he's better when A.J. Green's on the field. I think last year when A.J. Green got out, everybody bought him because they thought he was going to take a step. But you see that a lot where receivers just fit in that wide receiver 2 role and put up better points when they're in it. You see guys like Marvin Jones that do it. Juju Smith-Schuster, hopefully he can take a step forward. But it just seems like sometimes guys are better in situations where they don't have the best cornerbacks on them and they're not getting the most focus. They're getting less double teams. And Tyler Boyd's that player. So for him to be that low, it is criminal. But wide receivers in the NFL nowadays are so talented, and it's definitely the deepest. And there's a lot of talent above them, though. But there's a lot more players I would rather have that are above Tyler Boyd in this ADP, and Brandon Cooks.
All right.
Frozen.
Sully, did you have anything? Or
Frozen.
No,
Sully's
sorry.
frozen.
I'm frozen up,
Oh.
but I think I'm still here.
All
Yeah,
right.
you're here.
I agree. I agree with basically everything that you've said, both of you. Tyler Boyd's rock solid wide receiver 2 in the league and a good fantasy guy to have. Interesting is that, and this might be a crazy thing to say, but Joe Burrow might be the best quarterback that Tyler Boyd's ever played with. So we're going to find out what that Cincinnati offense is going to be all about. I think Joe Mixon has a better year. AJ Green being back definitely makes that a more well-rounded offense and keeps defenses honest. And the offensive line, if they can stay healthy, I think it was their first round pick from a year before, missed the entire season. So if they can stay healthy, they're going to be better. They're still not going to be a great football team, but Tyler Boyd, regardless of, over the last couple of seasons, has proven that he's rock solid in that spot. And I would absolutely be jumping all over him at that ADP.
All right. How about we do? You guys have any couple of honorable mentions, honorable mention or two to go through before we move on to the questions? Bryce.
I might be biased, but I think Julian Edelman is an honorable mention. He's ranked below Tyler Boyd and Brandon Cooks as well. He's a good PPR player, but again, I'm just kind of putting that based on the players above him. He's also a question mark because he is a timing receiver, and Cam Newton might not be suited for that. But you never know. It seems like he's got his head on straight right now. Maybe his attitude changes, and he maybe gets that connection with Edelman, especially a guy that likes to run through the middle like that. So, Sully?
I think my honorable mention for undervalue would I have two, so I have to pick one. It's going to be Robert Woods, and I think that Robert Woods has outperformed his ADP for 7 straight seasons. He's their top target, and if they go in 12 personnel and they keep running out two tight ends, and it's going to affect Cooper Kupp in the slot, it is also going to open up more for Robert Woods. And somehow that guy didn't score a touchdown till I think it was week 14 last year. So I'm not sure what his current ADP is, but my whole world is frozen here. I don't know what's going on. So, but that would be my guy for sure.
All right. Well, I kind of gave one guy a little bit, which was Deshaun Jackson right next to Curtis Samuel. Either one of them for me could have worked there. But the guy I took off the list now becomes my honorable mention. That was Alexander Mattison. I think with the Dalvin Cook possible holdout, he's going to, possibly have an opportunity there. Not only that, Dalvin Cook never stays healthy. And
Come on.
I really like Madison. I think he's a good runner, and I think he's going to get even an expanded role over what he had last year, get an opportunity to get even a few more carries, which, the way he runs, I like it. So obviously, Sully, you disagree, but
I don't necessarily disagree. I don't think Dalvin Cook's hurt all the time. I think he's unfairly painted in that way. He tore his ACL in his rookie season, and he had an incredibly common hamstring injury after an ACL after that. And last year he had a shoulder injury that he missed a little bit of time. So, look, he was injured in 3 straight years, so he has injury history for sure. I like Alexander Mattison. I think I'm pleasantly surprised by how he played last year for the Vikings. I'm not 100% sure how Kubiak plans on using him. He historically has been sort of a one running back kind of guy. And I do think the Vikings throw the football a little bit more. But Alexander Mattison, to me, is one of the top 2 handcuffs in football and fantasy football.
Yeah.
Not a big handcuff guy, but if I was going to get one, it would be him or Tony Pollard, and that's about it. So I don't disagree. I think he's definitely valued, even slightly as a standalone player, at his current ADP.
Sully, I know you're the resident Vikings guy here. I know the injury was not the worst thing in the world to the shoulder last year, but Dalvin Cook did have a history of shoulder issues coming out of Florida State. Does that additional history worry you at all with the shoulder and
No.
just the impact that can take as a running back trying to go through the middle?
Honestly, it probably should, but it doesn't. And the only reason is that because every running back's carry could be their last. Like it's such a violent position to play. And, I was big on Cook last year and big on Fournette last year because I don't really buy into injury history. I like talent and opportunity, and Cook has a ton of talent and a ton of opportunity. As long as he's on the field, he's going to be a top, what's his ADP? He's going as like about the top 4 or 5 running back. I don't know. To answer your question shortly, no, I'm not.
All right. Bryce, anything to add on Madison?
No, he already kind of touched base. I thought he was the most valuable handcuff. I usually don't handcuff, but if it's one of my first round guys that might have an injury history, it's one that's one of the few that I would do.
Yeah, and so you mentioned Madison Pollard. The one guy I would add to that list would be Latavius Murray in New Orleans.
That's a good one.
Those are the 3 primary handcuffs for myself as well. All right. Reminder, please like and subscribe on YouTube to RotoHeat, and hit the notifications bell so you don't miss any of our RotoHeat content. Also, if you're watching on Facebook, you can turn on the notifications to get notified when we go live, and of course, get those notifications set up for the podcast as well when that goes live. Taking a look at some questions that we've gotten. Going back to one of our news items, Raheem Mostert asking for a trade. Who's going to want him? That comes from Gerald Black and Gold Light Toes.
Good, Sully.
I think it's a great question, and I don't even know if I have an answer. If I'm running through the top places, I don't know. I really don't. It's late for a running back at this point to move. Maybe Chicago.
Definitely possible.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I think they pay him. I think they're going to end up paying him. I think he proved to be valuable during the most important time of the year, and that was in the playoffs for him. He did pretty well. So I think they're going to end up paying him. It's not like he's asking for a ton of money. He's asking for a good amount, but as the starter, I think they'll end up doing it, especially with the Kevin Coleman not really working out for him, and Jerick McKinnon. I don't even know the last time he played football. So I think they end up paying him, but that's the best situation for him too. So
I think the craziest thing is Mostert went bananas in the NFC Championship game last year, and I can't remember, a couple 100 yards, a couple touchdowns. I think might even have scored 4 touchdowns. He didn't even start in the Super Bowl. Like, they started Tevin Coleman coming off an injured knee. So I don't know. I don't necessarily disagree that they're going to pay him, but I just don't see why they would. So at the same time, I don't have a home for Raheem Mostert, so maybe they will pay him. That's a tough one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have a feeling like they're just not going to pay him, and he's going to play where he's at the price he's at. If there was somebody who was going to trade for him, there's 2 guys who come to mind to me. One is never going to happen because it's in division, but Pete Carroll loves to get running backs and do crazy things with running backs. And with Rashad Penny missing half the year, that would be a good location, I feel like, but it's not going to happen. So going to move on. The other crazy guy is Bill O'Brien. And God, who knows what they could give up? I mean, it might be Deshaun Watson for Raheem Mostert and Jimmy Garoppolo at this point. I don't know. But
I just drafted DJ in the Scott Fish Bowl, so he better not do that.
Yeah, and other than that, I mean, I don't really know where there's a fit for him. Do you maybe take him to Cincinnati to take a little bit of the load off of Mixon, because Giovanni Bernard is, he's got a role, but he's not going to take the load off of Mixon at all. Other than that, I really don't know where you can plug him into.
Maybe it's Tampa Bay. Maybe it's Miami. Is New England an option? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a tough question. All right. Well, these 2 are going to be outside our wheelhouse, but they're in the chat, so let's give them our best shot. because, well, this one is going to be in our outside of our wheelhouse. We're going to ignore the other because it doesn't affect redraft at all. Paul trying to confuse us here with a Devi question. I don't even know when Spencer Rattler gets drafted, so.
It's okay. Paul doesn't know what day of week it is.
But if we have an IDP league, I don't know. Do you guys know Corey Littleton at all? And what do you think about him?
I don't play IDP, so I would be completely ignorant on this. So you'd have to go to Sully or you.
You would have to go to you, Rob. I don't. I'm the least knowledgeable IDP guy there is.
Yeah, I bet I could beat you.
I'll take that challenge.
I'm really the same. I have never played an IDP league, unfortunately, but gonna get that first chance here as RotoHeat Brad's putting together a little Devi IDP mix league, and so we'll get my first shot at it, get to learn some things, and hopefully sometime in the future be able to answer a question like that a little bit better as I begin to learn that process. I'm also doing my first ever Devi draft as we speak, and so far I'm like, wow, there's a lot of guys in college going off the board, and my team's got a lot of guys in the NFL. So another one from Gerald Black and Gold Light Toes here. Do you think CMC is going to get another 400 carries this year?
No, I don't think he gets. I think that Christian McCaffrey is still going to be arguably running back 1, running back 2. Him and Barkley up there are pick'ems to me, but it's going to be hard to match the season he just had, and rightfully so. I mean, if he even gets, if he gets pretty close to it, that's another amazing year. But to ask him or to think that he's going to put up or even touch the ball as many times as he did this past year is just, it's kind of far fetched. And do you really want it at that point? Because that's a lot of wear and tear. And I feel, especially in redraft, you want it, but for dynasty, you definitely won't. But I just don't think they do it as an organization. They're going to want to try and keep him healthy for as long as they can.
I agree with that. I actually came across this stat today. The Panthers ran 1,061 plays last year, which is actually a high percentage of plays run according to or comparison to other teams in the league. And historically, first-year offensive coordinators finish in the bottom part of the league in those types of statistics in terms of numbers of plays called. So I do think with the addition of Teddy Bridgewater and a new offensive coordinator, I think they're going to slow down a little bit. So, and I also agree with, I don't know really why you would do that to him. Again, you're not a good football team. You're not going to make the playoffs. You're not going to win probably more than 4 or 5 football games. So he's the best player in your team. He's arguably one of the best players in the game, and he's going to get the football. But there's no reason to force feed this guy. And, you just signed him to a massive contract as well. So protect your asset. I wouldn't be stunned if he hits 400, but I don't think he should. That's how I'll answer the question.
The one thing that I think about when you were bringing that up, I think it's a really good point, and I looked it up as you were talking about it, that they were 6th in plays run last year, and that's crazy per game for a team. But they were so bad. I feel like the defense let the other team's offense score so quickly all the time that the offense was constantly rolling back out on the field. Maybe that's part of it. I'm trying to think back. Seemed like there was a game last year. It was a home game where they gave up like 3 touchdowns in a matter of like 4 offensive plays to the other team. And I think Kyle Allen had a couple of picks in there. And, in the meantime, they had run like 15 plays while they were giving up those 3 touchdowns. So, I mean, I think that kind of played a role into it a little bit. Again, I expect Teddy Bridgewater to hold on to the ball a little bit more, not have all those turnovers. Hopefully the defense a little bit more sound. They're probably not going to run as many plays, just as you've been saying. All right. Michael Thomas, 150 catches. Think he'll do it again?
I do not.
I do not either.
I agree. Similar situation. That's just a lot of volume. You want to preserve your talents like that. It also seems unnecessary for the amount of talent they have in their offense.
I agree.
So it's hard to, when you have players that do so good like that, it's almost like they hit their peak value and people get so excited, and then ever since then you're going to get good value out of them, but you're never going to have that year.
Right.
Yeah.
The other point is they brought in probably the
Emmanuel Sanders,
other than Brandon Cooks, his first couple of years, probably the best other wide receiver he's played with in Emmanuel Sanders. He's going to garner targets too. They don't have to force feed him as much as they have the last couple of years.
Yeah,
Emmanuel Sanders is elite. Good.
He's darn good, and they call these seasons career years for a reason. This was a record-breaking season for an NFL wide receiver. You're not going to do this year over year, and if he does, good on him. But I just don't see it.
And I do think the opportunity to have Sanders on the other side could lead to more touchdowns for Michael Thomas. Maybe he hits double digits just because they can't triple team him in the red zone necessarily with Emmanuel Sanders over there.
Yeah, he had 15 this last year, so even hitting 10 again is just a good year.
Yeah, so I definitely think he can keep that rolling. All right, sure. Make sure you tune in again next Wednesday for another Fantasy Inferno. We'll always answer questions live at the end of the show, so tune in at 9:30 Eastern to see us live. Otherwise, you can watch us after the show's over on YouTube and listen to the Fantasy Inferno podcast. Guys, one more time before we wrap up, how can we get a hold of you?
Sorry, I'll go here. Kind of fell asleep at the switch there for a second. RotoHeat Sully on Twitter. As Bryce has pointed out earlier in the show, on Discord chat as well, in our Facebook communities, and Sully's 2 Cents Fantasy Football Podcast every Friday. That's me.
Right, and same for me. Other than Twitter, you can find me on Discord in the RotoHeat. Again, it's free to join that, guys. All types of things. You can ask questions, get opinions, give your opinions, things like that, all things fantasy football. And then you can find me on Facebook as well, and all the RotoHeat communities. So feel free to message me on either of those platforms.
All right. And if you're on the YouTube or if you're listening back on the podcast, go to our YouTube, go to the end of this video on this episode. Rick Butts posted the Discord link for folks to join. And also make sure you like and follow RotoHeat Dynasty Football page and the RotoHeat Redraft page on Facebook as well. The redraft page pretty new, but we're building up the content there, mainly on the back of Mr. Sully here. But once again, you can find me on Twitter at RotoHeatRob. And have a good night, and we'll see you again next week with our overrated players here on the Fantasy Inferno.
Don't forget, make sure you hit the subscribe button and notification bell so you don't miss any more fantasy football content from the RotoHeat.com team. Also, right there, playlist. Hit it. Watch the video.